I had to find my way and find some acceptance in the physical therapy community because I was unusual. There were virtually no men working with children at that time.
As a physical therapist working with kids in public schools for 30 plus years for your career, what all cities did you work in?
Primarily in cities in Washington State, Bellevue, Kirkland, Bothell, Woodinville, Redmond, Auburn, Bremerton, and a little bit in Everett.
And you work overseas too?
Yes, I had the chance to live overseas in Samoa for 2 years, in Kenya for a year, and my wife and I then lived in the Cook Islands for 2 years.
And in all of those cases, you did some physical therapy work with youth?
Yes,
And the
yeah,
age range of the kids that you've worked with is what?
from 3 years old to 21.
Because public school students are entitled to physical therapy services if some evaluation determines that they're entitled to that. And that's the role that you played, was offering those physical therapy services. And they would go up to 21, even though that's older than we think of a normal high school student,
Right.
because some students stay in high school longer because they have, I guess, special needs.
Yes, and it gives them a longer runway. And a mandate also came down on the federal level that we needed to do more for these students about occupation, about getting them ready for the workplace.
When you decided to embark on the path of becoming a physical therapist, did you already know at the beginning that you wanted to work with children?
I did. I grew up doing babysitting jobs, and at the time, it just seemed perfectly normal to me. There were four of us boys in the family, and mom would get a call from someone and say, "Hey, can you babysit here and there?" And so I was very used to it. Then I was drawn to kids mainly because of their enthusiasm and their honesty and just the fun of being with really a kind of an unsullied adult.
An unsullied adult. Okay.
Yeah. So it was great fun, and I took that into physical therapy school and made sure that I had pediatric experiences there. Went to school in 1971 to 75 at the University of Washington. When I was there, it was a bachelor's degree. It is now a doctoral degree. The ratio of men to women in the class was about one third men, two-thirds women in a class of 30.
So back then it was two-thirds women, one-third men, not in a program specifically for working with children as a physical therapist, but just generally becoming a physical therapist.
Right. And that was because physical therapy was an outgrowth of nursing.
When I was going to become a teacher, like an assistant English teacher in Malaysia in my early 20s, I talked with you about it, and you had some advice for me, some different like principles and just kind of rules of thumb that you had developed in your years working with kids. And I wondered if you recall any of those and can share any of those.
In terms of interacting with kids in general, and regardless of your gender or their gender, the idea was to make sure you were managing the situation and on top of things, to not be so much a buddy to the kids, but a guide. That it was your responsibility as an adult to take them where they needed to go in terms of skills and understanding and learning. I believe advice that was unique to being a man was to just make sure that you were always visible, that someone was always checking on you in a positive way, so that there could be no uh, accusations made about inappropriate touching or anything like that. Um, the key was to get permission from the parents and to let them know what you were doing, as well as letting the child know or the student know that when you were going to touch them and move them. So there was a little bit of forewarning.
Along the lines of what you were saying as far as the need to guide children versus having the mentality or the approach of being their buddy, I remember you saying things like this the way you if you phrase things as a question versus as a statement. And so
Right,
I think you coached me on don't ask like, do you want to do this now? You say, now we're
right,
doing this.
right. You don't say, "Do you want to get up on the table now?" You say, "It's time to get up on the table." And then you can give them a choice. You can get up over here or over there. Which place do you want to get on the table?
Okay. So you have a direction you're taking things, but you still find avenues for them to have some choice.
Right. All right, correct. Another example would be we're going to do three things today. We're going to walk on the board, play with the ball, and play with a blanket. Which one do you want to do first? And that gives them the agency.
Do you have any reflections, given that the advocacy that I'm up to here is related to boys and men, do you have any reflections on gender-based or sex-based differences in working with female compared to male students over your career?
I don't have as many reflections on that as I do on me being a man and working with children. That seemed to be the main gender difference. When I was working with children, they seemed to be, in many ways, just kids. But um, I had to find my way and find some acceptance in the physical therapy community because I was unusual. There were virtually no men working with children at that time.
Did you tell me that at times it either felt like or in reality was the case that you'd be at a school where the only men were you, the custodian, and the principal?
Yes, yes. One of my last jobs, there were just three men at the elementary school, the principal and the custodian and myself. Um, but in many settings, and I do mean many, the majority, particularly in elementary school, there would be very few men, even in the teaching staff. At first, I didn't notice that much. I wasn't that aware. But as my career developed, I started to tip my head a little bit and say, "Hey, where are the guys here?" And here's why I did it: because parents expressed to me an enthusiasm and an appreciation that their son or daughter had a male physical therapist. That was important to them and they enjoyed it. I think because of the different perspective that I brought. And again, these are very general things. I'm not saying that they are lock solid gender specific, but I brought a kind of roughhousing and um, active role as a man to my physical therapy practice, my practice there. Whereas the women generally um, were cautious and considered the students fragile. It wouldn't occur to them to take one of them out of their wheelchair and put them on the floor and wrestle with them, which is something that any child, regardless of their gender, needs for motor development, the sense of moving through space and what does it feel like to lay on top of someone or have another student wrestling with them, what we used to call roughhousing. So I did an appropriate amount of that to make sure that they had that experience in their growing up.
So you heard positive things from parents of the kids who were excited that their child was having a male physical therapist because they could observe some ways that you worked with them, and then maybe they were seeing the positive results of that at home when you weren't around and the kids were improving their skills.
Yes, I want to stress that it was more than casual, that it was pretty universal, that there would be a kind of relief or a sigh, or the moms, particularly because they're largely mothers, women who are you're interacting with, would say things like, "Oh, thank goodness you're a man." And I didn't take it too far. In other words, I didn't see that that's all that I was, but I saw that they recognized a difference that was beneficial.
Nice. What about the kids themselves?
They seemed to enjoy themselves, and I prided myself on really good management during the therapy session. So I didn't leave gaps. I didn't leave a lot to chance. I don't think that they were consciously very aware of the gender change. They did enjoy seeing me, but I have no idea if that's based on that I was a guy or I was just going to be fun.
Are there any stories or anecdotes that you can share about working with certain kids over the years?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Part of my enthusiasm for working with kids is how honest they are and spontaneous. So I'll share two stories, Blair. One's inspiring and one's kind of funny. I was teaching this young boy, about 7 or 8 years old, second grader, who had cerebral palsy and had a lot of spasticity in his hands and a tough time with speech, but really a great kid. I was teaching him to catch a ball, and I bounced the ball to him and he missed it. And I bounced the ball to him again and he missed it. And I bounced the ball to him and he trapped it with his arm. He said to me, "Mr. Taylor, Mr. Taylor, I caught one in a row." So he was really happy, and it gave me the perspective that I wanted in my life, that I should celebrate if I catch one in a row. The second little story is about midway through my career. My mom passed away, and I had took some bereavement. And when I came back, the kids kind of wanted to know why I was gone. And this one little boy was, he wanted to know why I was gone. I said, "Well, my mom died." And she said, "Well, where is she now?" And I said, "Well, I think heaven." He said, do you get to visit her?" And I said, "Well, no, not right now." And then the more profound question came to him, and he stopped for a while and screwed up his face, and he said, well, who do you live with now?" He couldn't conceive of how do you live without your mom. Um, and that was charming. But there are hundreds of those stories. And what I want for children, particularly when I'm thinking of the advocacy that you're doing, is I yearn for a balance in the people that are around them and nurture them and raise them, that they get a diversity of experiences. No gender, I don't believe, has a claim on a certain attribute, but generally there are differences. And I think that that's a legitimate observation. I would like that those differences come together, particularly in elementary school, but middle school and high school as well. And I don't see that in the elementary setting, either in teaching or glaringly in physical therapy.
Interesting. Okay. What about in parenting? Do you have any observation about just in parenting in general?
There's quite a lack of men in the lives of children with disabilities. Again, I want to stress, not a rule, not something that's hard and fast, but in general, these are single moms. I believe the last time I checked, the divorce rate and the single mom rate among families with children with disabilities is higher than even the norm. So these moms are out there on their own, working hard, trying to do things, and there's not a man around. And I never really knew why that man wasn't around. And I would like to see anything that facilitates the dads being more involved. Now, it's easy to be dismissive and say, well, they don't want to be involved, but perhaps they do. And some parental plan, something's preventing that. And I would dearly like to see um, more dads involved and find out, make some studies, do some inquiries. Where are the dads? What's preventing them from being as involved as I think would be healthy?
Now I want to go to a topic that we'll see how comfortable you are talking about, but thinking about yourself in the position of as an employee of a public institution, a school, and there's the break room, the faculty lounge, and
Mm,
so apart from interacting with children, you're interacting with adults. You've talked to me some about experiencing things in a very female dominated, numerically at least, environment, where you can tell you're kind of in the minority as a male, and that things are said, comments are made that are inappropriate, that
yeah,
wouldn't be
yeah.
tolerated the other way around, and that might have different consequences if the sexes were reversed.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't have any issue talking about it. It was a reality for me, Blair, for 45 years, that I would enter a staff room and it would be all women or just perhaps two men and the rest of them would be women. And the conversations would get quite inappropriate times, things about menstruation and pregnancies and all. And I would kind of lightheartedly object or say, oh, I'm eating here or something like that. But they would just plow ahead with their conversations. It was very much like I was invisible. And I remember on many occasions me even approaching the slightest male topic and being brought up short and said, "Oh, you be careful, Dave. Um, we have boundaries here." And I think someone who's listening to me now would go, "Well, Dave, uh, why didn't you just confront it?" And it's a lot of the same awkwardness, I believe, that sometimes women use in saying, "I wanted to be a part of the group. I, sure, I could voice myself, but I mostly wanted to be engaged with them and part of the team, part of the faculty." One instance I remember was putting up a big poster of Brad Pitt, who with his shirt off, and he was very muscular, and that was in the staff room for a long time. I remember asking for it to be taken down, that I didn't like it, and that was um, mostly laughed at. And like, well, just because you're jealous, Dave, or something. And I think if it was turned upside down and there was a picture of a physically beautiful woman, I don't think it would stay up for 10 minutes. So those kinds of differences rankled me, and probably I could have or should have done more. And I did advocate for myself on occasions and made changes, but nevertheless, it was a very one way gender skew. And clearly, I am a person, I hope it's probably obvious, a person who enjoys humor and such or uses humor. So I would, in those instances, Blair, try to deflect it or make my wishes known in a way that was acceptable and not alienating, but still saying, "Hey, I don't want to hear about your date on Thursday night." Oh, you know what was talked about the most? I would say were exes. Um, the amount of hammering that ex-husbands got around the staff table was it was thick and fast. And a lot of that conversation was inappropriate when people start talking about the behavior of their ex-husbands.
If you chose to raise an issue, did you always try to do it among your colleagues, or were there times when you tried to escalate and go to someone in managerial or administration position above you all?
I did take it to the administration several times, uh, usually in the context of another meeting. So it wasn't a specific meeting I had called for that, but I would say, when I'm in the staff room, it gets uncomfortable for me to listen to some conversations as a man, and not much was done with that. It wasn't really taken seriously, um, which I know is during the women's rights time or now they would also say that, and it remains a true thing that we shouldn't be dismissive of anyone's uncomfortableness as long as it's sincerely brought and genuine.
Are there other things that you had in mind to share about your experience working with children as a physical therapist?
I think I didn't emphasize enough how cautious I was with touching and not wanting any accusations of physical impropriety. So I always made sure that I had windows and doors open. I would ask secretarial staff to check on me randomly, different safeguards that I would take. We used to do a lot of the therapy with the kids undressed, and I stopped that, yeah, not nude, but in their diapers. Because as a physical therapist, you can see a lot of the muscles and you can sense things with your hands that are important. But I stopped doing that in in the 80s, and my therapy suffered for it. It did. It wasn't as quite as sensitive, quite as subtle. In contrast, with all the precautions I was taking, even though there were these boundaries set of no hugs with kids or a 3-second hug or things, I would notice that the women would be lavish with their physical affection. And I do mean lavish, big, warm hugs and kids holding their hands and being around them. And there's a little part of me that said, "Hey, no fair." You need to follow the same rules I am, or relax the rules on me a little bit. So I'm emphasizing that, Blair, that was an inequality.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Could you tell a couple more stories?
Sure, these kids are dear and they're people first, but they also have these challenges that they're living with. And I was working with one teenager who he loved in his own compromised world to be an ambulance. So he would circle his fingers around like this and go and walk around the school being an ambulance. One day we were supposed to set up for the gym, and tables at that time were really heavy. They weren't these lightweight plastic tables, they were laminate. So I said, Kirby, you help me take this table. And I took one end and he took the other, and he had his hand there, but he had this one up going, rear, 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 rear. And I got irritated with him. And I said, Kirby Miller, you use both hands. And he went, boom. So that was his idea of using two hands. One student, their perspective is so great because he looked up at me, he said, you're an old man. And I said, I'm not an old man. He said, yeah, you're an old man. And I said, well, what are you? Talk for a bit. He said, I'm a new man. It was the old man and the new man. They were working together.
You've known me for a long time, Dave, and you know that I've been a drummer for a long time. And at one point, we had some crossover between my drumming and your occupation because there was a good job drum that you implemented.
Right. It really does work to be positive with kids rather than negative, and rather than telling them no. And sometimes they need to hear no, but it does really work better to water what you want to grow. I would have a class of 6 to 8 children in their elementary years that had physical challenges. And during that time, they would work hard at doing the challenging things we were doing and having fun. But at the end, if they had done a good job, they got to beat the good job drum. And it had a big sign on it, good job drum. And we would beat that and chant, we did a good job, and pass it around the circle. And that was a highlight for them and a real motivator for next time.